As the resistance mobilizes, the British Prime Minister is insisting to the world that his actions are right, legal, and morally sound.
All my life, I've been a man of peace. Working for peace, striving for peace, negotiating for peace. And I'm still the same man, with the same conviction, the same devotion to peace. But I'm utterly convinced that the action we have taken is right.
As Eden is speaking, Port Said is burning. The war is barely a week old. Hundreds of Egyptian civilians have already been killed in the bombing campaign, and more die in the street fighting that follows. It is at this point that Eden hopes a terrified Egyptian population will rise up to overthrow Nasser.
They do not understand what Egypt is. They were completely wrong. The Egyptians were, all of them were one heart behind Nasser.
When they feel a foreign threat, the people come together. And this is what happened exactly.
The Egyptian armed forces may be hopelessly outgunned, but Nasser and his government remain in Cairo. Plans are made to begin a guerrilla war should the army be overwhelmed.
A popular army to fight in the canals, in the streets, in the countryside, in the port.
We were hiding arms all over the villages, everywhere in Egypt, so that even if the troops, they came to invade Egypt, we will fight, we will resist.
The Suez Crisis suddenly increases the temperature of the Cold War. Nikita Khrushchev sees his ally Nasser coming under attack in Cairo and realizes that Soviet prestige appears to be crumbling on two continents.
He feels that the West is taking advantage of him when he is down. That the British and the French are watching his troubles in Eastern Europe and see that they have an opportunity to deal with one of his allies now because he is distracted. And his reaction was the reaction of a political leader who is fearful, surprised, and angry at the same time.
He threatens the West with the doomsday option.
He said to the world that don't be surprised if the consequence of your actions is that nuclear weapons will fall on London and Paris. This was the first time they had ever made a nuclear threat.
Suddenly, it looks like Eden's adventure in Egypt is going to end in Armageddon.
Somebody had a radio, and we heard on that the Russians were threatening to drop bombs on London, and the Chinese might be about to join in too. And at that moment I did think this is really going to be the Third World War.
The threat of nuclear war concentrates minds in Washington, where President Eisenhower is already furious with the Prime Minister.
The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance.
He was so angry with the British. I mean, it was really angry with the British. They had gone around his back and colluded with these other guys.
In front of the world, the American Secretary of State condemns his country's oldest ally.
I doubt that any delegate ever spoke from this forum with as heavy a heart as I have brought here tonight.
Eden had the awful realization that he had totally misjudged the American aspect of the affair.
Eden's plans are unraveling fast. He has not anticipated this level of hostility from the Americans, nor from his own people.
If he is sincere in what he is saying, then he is too stupid to be a prime minister.
There was demonstrations in London as big as demonstrations in Egypt.
And there is only one way in which they can even begin to restore that tarnished reputation. And that is to get out, get out, get out!
As opposition across the world mounts, morale in Port Said soars.
People around the world were backing you. In the West, we had the public opinion with the Egyptians.
And Eden realizes he has fatally miscalculated the reaction of the Egyptian population to invasion. Nasser refuses to go into hiding. He determines instead to rally his people after Friday prayers at Cairo's ancient Al-Azhar Mosque.
هنحارب من بيت إلى بيت ومن قرية إلى قرية سنقاتل ولا نسلم سنقاتل ولن نعيش عيشة ذليلة سنقاتل حتى آخر الدم بنبني بلدنا بنبني تاريخنا بنبني مستقبلنا.
In London, Eden is feeling the strain. He has failed to win the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people. Nasser is more popular than ever, and now comes the decisive blow. Britain's currency reserves have been hemorrhaging since the bombing campaign began, as dealers all over the world dump sterling.
In those days, Britain was the banker of the sterling area. Britain saw an immediate danger of the bottom falling out of that.
When Eden appeals to the Americans for financial help, President Eisenhower makes sure there will be no room for misunderstanding this time.
Eisenhower was quite firm. He said, as soon as you agree to get out, and really are getting out, we'll help you, but not a minute before.
The arrival of United Nations contingents at Port Said causes a sensation that nearly develops into a riot by excitable Egyptians.
Of course, I was jumping with joy. When the last British soldier left, we used to say, go to hell.
Plans are made for United Nations troops to replace the British and French on the ground. The ceasefire is a humiliating climb down for Eden and his commanders.
I have to say that most of the officers in the regiment took it as a mortal blow. I think it was very, very hard on the professional soldiers who had gone into this enterprise in good faith, thought that this was going to be the final roar of the British Lion, and suddenly found that it was just a sort of mingy little squeak that had achieved nothing.
Eden never returned to frontline politics, and his reputation never recovered from taking Britain to war in the Middle East under false pretenses. Britain's reputation was equally damaged.
Well, it was a total, utter disaster. And it took us 20 years to recover our rightful position as someone who was not the lord and master in that area, but a friend to those states which had emerged after many centuries when we and the French had ruled the roost.
In Egypt, the Suez Crisis was the making of Nasser.
The 23rd of December, 1956, dawned beautifully. It was the first day after the liberation of Port Said, and the whole city was out to celebrate Victory Day.
At that time, he was, he was God. I have to tell you.
President Nasser is a historic hero.
In the aftermath of the Suez Crisis, Nasser was feted all over the Arab world. Here at last was a leader who could stand up to the West and win.
And the Arabs at that time started to realize that Nasser was the hero who was sent by God to retrieve the Arabs from many years of subordination.
Ordinary Egyptians have drawn their own lessons from the Suez Crisis.
There is a great difference between resistance and terrorism. I was a patriot, defending my country.
I am a human being. I have dignity. I don't accept any foreigner to dominate me. Or else, I am a slave. Right or wrong?